Hello, welcome. On behalf of RANG, I would like to welcome you all to the Research Administration Forum. Thank you so much for taking your time to come out and listen to the updates that we have for you today. We will have a series of question and answer time after speakers because you requested that last time. So we'll have about 5 minutes after each speaker for you to ask questions, and then we'll have to move forward so we have time for every speaker. Also, we'll have a couple of door prizes in between a couple of speakers, so be looking for that. Did everybody get a ticket in the back? Everybody get a ticket? If you didn't, you can go grab one. We have 2 door prizes for you guys. Okay, so we'll get started because we have a lot of great speakers today I know you guys are looking forward to. Our first speaker today is going to be Matt Ronning. He is the, the Associate Assistant Vice President for Responsible Research Practices. And he's going to be talking about, it's a great long word, operationalizing excellence. Did I say it right?
Yes, you did.
Okay, so Matt, if you want to come on up. And we also have agendas in the back for you guys to follow along since we won't be introducing every speaker. So be sure and pay attention to that. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me all right? Can you hear me? Can you see me? I came as a blues brother today. Which one am I? That's the first question of the day. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not, and Melinda's in black. Well, thank you very much, folks, for having me here. If you have any questions, we'll have some time at the end of my presentation throughout the day. But you're also welcome to stand up and yell out any questions you might have. I think you might. Can you still hear me?
No.
Okay. Go with there we go. Let me use that mic there. Thanks. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. Thank you. Setting my cell phone down there. I'll probably leave it, but I'm very privileged to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and introduce myself and introduce some topics that are of interest to me. And I see many people in the audience from the schools and the departments who I've already met, and I'm really thrilled to see you. Hope you have some good questions, and I look forward to entertaining those questions as we go. So I'll start with, who am I? Well, I am, as Debbie mentioned, the Assistant Vice President for Responsible Research Practices here at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. I've been here just over 4 months, and I've come from all around the country. Most recently, I've been a management consultant, trampling around the country, going to different institutions, conducting a variety of investigations and reviews of process and process improvement opportunity. But over the course of my 30 years as a research administrator, I have also been a research integrity officer, and we're going to talk a good bit about that, as well as a director of sponsored programs, a contract negotiator, facility security officer. Whatever it is, I've probably done it. And I will say myself that I've done it quite well. Thank you very much. But as I work through my presentation today, I'll show you a couple of interesting slides, and I don't really have a pointer that works, so the pointer does not work on the background, but that's okay. I was going to point out this plagiarism that I've done myself here. That tree there is nothing more than something I just picked up off the web because it looked good. Okay, there's your first clue. I'm a research integrity officer, and I never steal anybody else's work, but I did steal that. I did give a little bit of credit there. It's really important that we recognize what is good practice and what's wrong practice. So the right doing and the wrong doing of a conversation today may stem, some questions may stem from therefrom. So responsible research practices is an all-encompassing phrase that Chris Brown, the Vice President for Research here at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, and others coined when they were putting this position together. And it encompasses more than research misconduct and investigating research misconduct allegations, but I am going to talk about that. What it encompasses is looking at processes that support the research enterprise and ensuring that the faculty and the research staff and the staff themselves are well equipped with the tools and the know-how on how to achieve compliance and achieve excellence in managing these resources that we're entrusted in. So I'm trying to advance this thing, but I don't know that. There we go, I got a point, okay. So to begin with, I'll just start off with the general framework of responsible research practices. Now here at UAB, Lisa Schwiebert in the graduate school has put together one of the best responsible conduct and research practicums in the country. And I've seen dozens of them. I've been to many sessions around the country at various institutions, and I really have to say what has been put together at the University of Alabama, Birmingham is quite impressive. And I think we owe Lisa and the graduate school and her team a big accolades for such a great job. I think there's even going to be an expansion of that in reach further into faculty and perhaps even undergraduate students. I don't know if Lisa's here today, but I didn't mean to talk about that. But the general framework of responsible conduct is about honesty and accuracy, efficiency, and objectivity. If you read any of the materials that you receive from the Office of Research Integrity or from the federal government in any capacity, we're going to talk about these 4 principles of honesty, accuracy, efficiency, and objectivity. And we hear about this constantly, and they're embedded in our administrative processes. And in order for us to achieve this standard, if you will, we have to be attentive to the demands and the stresses that are felt in the research labs themselves. We can't do it behind a closed wall. We can't do it behind our desk. We have to be engaged and we have to be attentive to the stress that is encountered in the research enterprise itself as research is being performed. I'm just going to get a little closer here because my pointer is not working really well. I like to walk around. Now, one aspect of research, responsible research practices at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, is this issue of research misconduct. I'm not going to spend a lot of time today talking about it, but I will just briefly define it for you. Federal regulations define what a research integrity officer is, that's me, and what research misconduct means. Just reading it here, research misconduct means fabrication, falsification, or plagiarism in preparing, performing, or reviewing research or reporting research results. Now, falsification, defined as manipulating research methods or research materials, equipment, processes, or changing or omitting data, as opposed to research fabrication, which is making up the data altogether. And plagiarism, appropriation of others' ideas without proper attribution. We look at these 3 elements of the fiduciary continuum of managing our research enterprise in the research misconduct regulations. UAB has research misconduct regulations, and they're modeled after the federal regulations that govern research misconduct. I'm not going to talk a lot about that, but what I want to get into are the causes. And the causes are stress related, often. Often there are so many expectations on our researchers. What I have here is you can't read it, unfortunately, and I can't point to it, but the red ball there are all of the administrative obligations of our faculty. And our faculty and researchers alike are encumbered between 40 and 50% of their time, according to the Federal Demonstration Partnership, which conducts a survey on administrative burden in the research enterprise. So we're saying, Federal Demonstration Partnership says that about 40 to 50% of our faculty and our researchers' time is dedicated to administration, to managing the research enterprise itself. And much of this is to be expected. Of course, we have to hire and train and ensure our students and our postdocs are properly equipped with the skills and the instrumentation and whatnot that's necessary for them to conduct the research. But it's a little bit overkill if we're actually having to spend upward towards 50% of our researchers' time managing, working through the administration of not only grants and contracts, but human subjects and animal care and export controls and foreign influence and all of these wonderful things that keep flying at us. And we don't get additional resource and we don't add additional people on a regular basis to help with this management. This is very stressful, and it leads to an environment that is short on time and short on nerves. A lot of times what we see is a great deal of frustration, from poor documentation to a lack of communication, to poor leadership or missing leadership altogether because we're busy and faculty are traveling, researchers are out to professional meetings. Forgetfulness and incompetence comes into play. Often it is amazing we can remember half of what we do on a regular basis, on a daily basis, let alone if we have 25 subordinate researchers or scientists working alongside and we're responsible for them as well. So I have a great deal of empathy and sympathy and concern for faculty, and how do we minimize this administrative burden that they are placed under. It's a question that plagues institutions around the country, and people like Melinda and Jonathan, Chris and others, all of you, are working tirelessly to find solutions to minimize these administrative burdens on our faculty. The one area that, and by the way, I haven't said this, don't rely on that. I'm just going to go over here and press the button. There we go. I invite you, and I see many of you who have already indicated their interest, to invite me. I have a broader conversation about research integrity and research misconduct and avoiding some of the pitfalls that I like to present to faculty, and have a nice, robust conversation or discussion about those issues. And I invite you to invite me to come to faculty meetings or other venues in which your faculty are present and might be interested in this conversation. But what I always end with is how to avoid these pitfalls. And the number one thing that you can do as a scientist or a researcher or a professional of any kind is heal your adversarial relationships. Inevitably, I have a list up here, but I like to get to the punchline. Inevitably, there is an adversarial circumstance or relationship or concern in the background at play when you all of a sudden are dealing with an allegation of research misconduct. Not always, but often some relationship problem has occurred. This is either a disgruntled former student or somebody who didn't quite make it for their PhD, or it can be otherwise, even worse. It can be an amorous or inappropriate relationship of some sort that has gone bad. And there's nothing worse than ending up in somebody else's closet of skeletons. Actually, if I were to ask Joe Roberson, he would say that's the funnest thing in the world. And we're in that closet all the time. No, Joe, I'm putting words in your mouth there, but it is quite amazing some of the garbage you get to see when you are a research integrity officer at a university. Not necessarily at UAB. I've only been here 4 months, so I don't have too many skeletons to talk about yet. But once you're in that closet, and I've been in many closets, it's not fun, and it can be quite a challenge to work your way out of it. Not just certainly not for me as the RIO Research Integrity Officer, but for the faculty or the others who are impacted by an allegation of research misconduct. So I also put in here some very important elements that to your daily routine that are important for faculty and researchers to pay attention to, that I like to share and have a dialogue with in a group of faculty. Recording your work regularly is really critical. Having that, the documentation of what you did, when you did it, who did it, how it was done, the methods and all of that, well documented, is so critical. And in today's world, we are moving to electronic methods of capturing this data. And Kent Kaiser and his team have negotiated a contract with a electronic lab notebook utility called Lab Archives. I don't know if anybody's heard of it yet, but you will be hearing about it as we deploy that utility across campus over the next several weeks and months ahead. And that will offer a considerable amount of standardization that is so critical in maintaining a compliant lab and ensuring that the principles within the lab are well understood and followed on a regular basis. And review what you're documenting. It's not good enough just to write it down. You also need to review it, and you need to think about it, understand what it is you've written down, know who is responsible for what, and who should take questions, and who should take opportunity to instruct others, counsel everyone who is related to the research that you're conducting so that they understand how you expect them to behave. Study. A literature review is not a one-day task, and it's not complete at any particular given point. It's a continuum that goes along the research path with you. But the most important element, as I've mentioned, is to heal those adversarial relationships. As interesting as those stories may be, I'm not going to talk about them, but I am going to talk about, very briefly here, how you operationalize these principles. I call it operationalizing excellence. And what I mean as a research administrator, and what I've seen and observed here in my short stay at the University of Alabama, Birmingham so far, is that you're already well along the path of operationalizing excellence. This group in and of itself, the Research Administration Networking Group, is the example that is set at many institutions around the country, pulling together the distributed research administrative environment in a matrix form of management. It's not an organizational change, it's a state of mind. It's recognizing that you're all responsible for everything having to do with the research administrative environment. And if you don't know something, you know to ask questions. You know how to architect a solution. You know how to identify the people who do have the right answers and call them up or email them. But you also have a responsibility. You have a responsibility to be highly receptive to questions and concerns, to be very responsive to your colleagues, especially the faculty and researchers. And you need to recognize that it is so critical to empower your colleagues to make wise decisions and choices on their own so that they can enable and operationalize the excellence that the research enterprise expects. Now, I think we're going to have one last slide here and go into questions. So are there any questions? Nothing at the time. Thank you very much. Again, I'd like you to invite me to your faculty seminars if they are, if you find it would be meaningful, and I appreciate the time.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Matt. Okay, door prize time. Wait 1 second. I know you really want to talk, Adam. Just give us 1 second. They will be mad if I don't do this. Okay, so I'm going to call out the last three numbers because I think everyone starts with 726. So 454. If you're 454, come this way. I have a door prize. It's a gift certificate for Lumbar. So you can go there to have lunch and drinks. Anybody who has the number? Did you say somebody raised their hand? 454? No one? They're pointing outside. Is there someone back there that has this? Oh, so maybe I should go again? Okay, that's what we'll do. If you run out, you don't get the prize, just saying. Must be present in this room. 448. 448. Anyone? Yay, there's a winner. Great. I'll meet you down here. So Adam, if you want to go ahead, I think you're next. I don't know what's going on with this. It might be the battery, but if it's not working for you, you can always push the button.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Can you hear me? All right. I'm Adam McClintock. I'm the director of the Office of the IRB. I've been with UAB for just shy of a year, and I am here today to give you a deep dive into the IRB pool to let you know some of the things that we're doing in the Office of the IRB. All right. So the things that we're doing really focus in 5 distinct, I guess, lanes, if you will. One is figuring out how to best utilize our electronic resources. Developing resources to facilitate a seamless review process for the single IRB, now that we're in the single IRB era. Best utilizing the people and the people resources we have in the office to meet the current research needs. Cross-training and making sure that those people know how to do their job and have the resources they need in order to do what they're going to be asked to do. And then finally, all of the things that we're doing, having a cohesive strategy to be able to communicate those out to the research community in a thoughtful and proactive way. So we'll start with the electronic resources aspect. So in July of 2019, we implemented a personnel e-form in the IRB module in IRAP. And so one of the biggest things that this does is it removes the duplicative data entry from the IRB staff so that they're not entering individuals into IRAP that you've already typed into your application. And that gives them a lot more time to be able to do more value-added things like review the forms. So that's been well received. We've got a lot of good feedback on ways we can further improve the form, and we'll be working on those things. In March, we will be implementing some administrative tools related to processing submissions after they've been reviewed by the IRB, again, to remove administrative hurdles so that it streamlines the process further and you can get communications from the IRB in a much more timely manner than you have been. Also in March, we will begin to coordinate CIRB and IRB processes such that right now when you submit to the IRB, we're checking for education related to human subjects, some of those different requirements. And then you'll also get the same check from the CIRB. So you have multiple different points where you can be held up or stopped to complete things that are essentially very similar processes. So we'll now be coordinated with the CIRB. So once you submit to the IRB staff will be doing those checks at a single time point and then communicating with the researchers and the CIRB if necessary to remove some of those middlemen from the process. And then this is the one that I'm really excited about is in June, we're currently in the process of developing e-forms in the IRB module to replace the current Word version of HSP, the continuing review form, the amendment form.
so that it's integrated into a single suite online. And again, that's going to remove administrative burden from you all and from the IRB staff. One of the big focuses of this form will be more standardized questions. So it's check boxes, radio buttons, drop downs, as opposed to free text where it can be sometimes a fishing expedition where you type something in and you get feedback from the IRB and sort of try again. So much more standardized process. And again, we're currently developing these, and we're on target for, I think, June of this year to release those. And you'll hear much more about that in the coming months. The next big lane that we're focusing on is the single IRB review process. So we're in January of 2018, the NIH had a single IRB mandate go into effect so that cooperative studies, multi-site studies that are funded by the NIH have to have a single IRB review them, as opposed to each site having their local IRB review. And the common rule had a mandate go into effect actually this week that essentially does the same. And so we really want to, as our federal funding is increasing, want to create a much more seamless process for the research community. Earlier this month, we updated our single IRB website to provide some additional resources and instruction on that process. And again, the single IRB mandate with the common rule went into effect this month, this Monday. And we're also beginning to offer pre-IRB submission consultations. So when you've got your funding score, your priority score, and it looks like you're going to get funded for a cooperative project, you can reach out to the IRB and meet with some representatives from the Office of the IRB. And the idea there is that we will help you identify any potential hurdles that you may face so that we can get those addressed before you submit. We can work with you on identifying a plan to help meet your turnaround time. So, if there's a particular order where you need to have your sites onboarded and approved, we can work with you on that, just so we all have a cohesive plan on how to help hit those milestones. And we've got two separate process improvement groups in the Office of the IRB focusing on the single IRB process, and they're really looking at the two separate pathways. One where we're the lead site of reviewing IRB for a multi-center project, and other institutions are relying on our approval. And then the other pathway, which is when we are a relying site where another IRB is reviewing and we're relying on them. And that could be anything from industry-funded study that's going through a commercial IRB, to an NCI-funded study going through the NCI Central IRB, to a federally funded study where we're relying on the IRB approval for another site. And I would really envision these toolkits, if you will, to be on our website, where we point you to a particular website that has different tools, forms, whatever, that are really succinct and right there, flowcharts that kind of help walk you through, provide you the tools that you need to navigate that process most efficiently and successfully. We, again, want to, over the course of the past probably 2 or 3 years, we've had an immense amount of fairly impactful regulatory changes, starting with the NIH single IRB mandate, changes to the genomic data sharing policy with NIH, revisions to the common rule, this common rule single IRB mandate. And what we've seen with these regulatory changes is a not insignificant shift in our research portfolio, where we're seeing a lot more research going through the exempt pathway, the expedited review pathway, and much less going to the fully convened IRBs. And so with that, we need to align our people to be able to better meet the needs of the current research portfolio. So we've got a plan to strategically reorganize how our teams are aligned and function. And we actually just introduced that to the IRB staff yesterday. And the idea is to create teams that have a much more diverse set of skills and experiences to be able to help them learn and develop from one another, and also to be more flexible to meet the needs of the research that's coming into the office. And so as we shift how the teams are composed, we'll also need to redistribute how the work is distributed to them. And we hope to have that final plan in place by September. And this is going to be much more of a transition, not a light switch where February 29th it's this and March 1st it's that, and vice versa. August 30th it's this, September 1st it's that. And then if we have to communicate these needs out to the research community, where if you're used to reaching out to Leslie or Carrie or whoever for something, and that's going to change, we need to communicate that out to all of you. The sort of hand in hand with that, we need to train our staff and equip our staff to give them the tools to be able to do what they're going to be asked to do in this restructured environment. So in August of 2019, we piloted a fairly comprehensive training and development program that targeted mid-level staff within the IRB office. And we learned several things from that. I think primarily that building a broader foundation is going to be different than establishing a foundation. So the needs of this group are a little bit different, the mid-level staff. And so what we're going to do is take what we learned through that pilot and adjust it, expand it, and really target training towards facilitating the reorganization. And then in March of this year, we're going to really hit the ground running with this and have regular assessments with supervisors to ensure that our staff are on track to be successful in their development plan. Excuse me. Finally, the communication aspect. We recognize that communication is something that's really important, and that rather than being an afterthought with a change, it should start at the forefront. As you're planning a change, you should start thinking about how to communicate that out to stakeholders that need to know, and the different avenues that we can communicate those changes. So in November of last year, we were fortunately able to recruit and onboard an outreach and education specialist, Christina Blackman. And she really, from the outset, began identifying the different channels of communication that we can use, whether it's listservs, newsletters, face-to-face research staff, things like that. And she began getting out there in the community, helping to assess the different needs, outreach needs, and starting to get regular communications out there through Research Matters, our listservs, other newsletters. So you should start seeing more regular communications coming from the Office of the IRB. And then by March, we plan to have a really thoughtful strategic communication plan so that we can, again, have regular updates from the IRB. The IRB website's in the process of being redesigned. And as part of that, we are going to focus on the updating the different constituencies, whether it's the research community, the participant community, and others that are identified. So those are some of the things that we're doing in the Office of the IRB. And if we have time and there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
If you have questions, because we're recording this for Zoom, we want you guys to say your question in the mic. So if you have a question, raise your hand and we'll find you. Anyone have a question for Adam? you guys are quiet today. This is very unusual. Okay, wow, moving on. Do you want to walk around? Would you like this?
I'm just going to stay here.
Okay, great.
Hello, everybody. The title of my talk is The Cute Way to Engage with HIIE. So I guess the idea here for my title is if you can't persuade people to listen to you, then try to charm them with cuteness. So obviously no. The KUT have a meaning and significance, which I will detail through the course of the talk. So I'm Karthik Gopalakrishnan. I'm the Director of Licensing and New Ventures here at UAB. Matt's got me beat. I've been here 5 months. I thought I was going to be the newest newbie, but I'm not. So the organization that I represent is the Bill Harbert Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. It's also called IIE. It's called UAB RF. We also respond to just hi. But really, they're all one and the same thing. So everybody should be asking yourself when you listen to any talk, what's in it for me? And that's what WIFM stands for, what's in it for me. And hopefully in the next 3 slides, I'll persuade you that there is something in it for you and tell you about the new programs that we've initiated. So who we are and what we do, what's the big picture? So those are some impressive numbers there. $1.5 billion raised by some of the startups that we have. Last year we had $6.43 million in revenue. And of course, being here for 5 months, I can take credit for all of that. But what's in it for me? You don't know that, right? So this was supposed to come one after another, but things got changed a little bit. So it really is your inventions that drive the licenses that we do, that found the startups, that help create the jobs, that gets those numbers up there. It's your inventions through which we need to engage with our community, because UAB being the largest employer in the state, people want to engage with us. And without your inventions, our office does not have a forum or an opportunity to engage with the community. So thank you for your inventions, which gives us that opportunity. Your inventions obviously improve patient care with the drugs and devices that you might invent. And from the mission of the university, it allows us to educate our students and the world at large. And obviously, that perfectly represents the mission pillars of UAB, and your inventions help us support mission pillars of UAB. If that's not what's enough for me, there's also money. So this is our patent distribution policy. So if we are successful in licensing an invention, the second column there talks about the share that our inventors get. And the third and fourth column there, which talks about the affiliated departments and affiliated schools, represents the money and income that gets distributed to schools from any money that we might make from the inventions that you generate. And there is a virtuous cycle here. And this virtuous cycle is research leads to invention disclosures, leads to licensing, leads to commercialization, leads to royalties, which comes back to research. So that's the virtuous cycle that your inventions help us create. So hopefully I persuaded that there is something in it for you here and driving the mission of UAB. But what is it that we really do with your inventions? We make educated guesses at predicting the future. And why do we have to make guesses at predicting the future? So you might invent something today, but by the time we are able to license this, it takes a year or 2. By the time that becomes a device or a product or a drug, it takes a further 4 or 5 or 6 years. So we are making important financial money decisions today that will have an impact really many, many years down the line, which is why we are making educated guesses at predicting the future. Of course, how we educate ourselves is we attend conferences, we read a lot of newsletters, we do market trend analysis, and we do a lot of networking with our peers. But they are guesses. So we are constantly reevaluating the patent decisions, the bets that we placed on your inventions, and sometimes we may have to drop them because our guesses may be wrong. So this is the first of the slides, which kind of expands on the KUT. And if you don't know who we are, then there's no reason and there's no way you would even want to engage with us. And so this talks about knowledge. Who are we? And the best way to represent that is through our process. I'll talk about this in multiple ways, but so we want to engage with you very early on. We want to engage with you even before you send an invention disclosure to us. Then, of course, you disclose an invention. We assess it, and then we make a patenting decision. We market it, and that would lead eventually to either the formation of a new company or a license. That's our process. So seeding innovation with understanding. So before I get to the pre-invention part, and the U, by the way, is the KU, the U of the KUT, let's talk about disclosing the invention. So we call at UAB our invention an intellectual property disclosure, or an IPD. You just go to our website, uab.edu/innovation, and there's a button there on the left saying disclose an invention. Click that button. At this moment, it's a paper form, but we anticipate very shortly with our new database that should be sometime mid this year implemented. This form would be online and electronic, so it should be far simpler to do. That's the process about disclosing an invention to our office. But the pre-invention part is, does my research have commercial potential? How do you know that? So what we have started is, and this is not fully implemented, but we started the process of taking grants that have been successfully funded. We take these grants and we have chosen what is not quite arbitrary, but grants that are there in their third year. And we have chosen this third year because that gives the PI the time and the opportunity to have engaged with the grant and maybe satisfied some of the aims that they were hoping to achieve. At that point, if we can do an analysis and share with the PI the commercial potential of their invention, if we can help them understand the potential market trends related to their research, and we can start that process of engagement with us early, then the PI still has at least a year or two of money left that they can, if they so choose at their discretion, channel some of the resources that they have from the grant to making it addressable to the commercial opportunities that it might have in store for them. And if you take nothing else away from this talk, though I really hope you do, please speak with us before you disclose your invention publicly. Once you disclose your invention publicly, it becomes a bar and we cannot patent that invention. So engage with us early and often. That's the message of the slide. The last slide is about transparency. So we really want to build trust with our processes, which are going to be hopefully very, very transparent. And so we are set up to do an assessment within a month of any inventor sending us an invention disclosure. We will send back to that inventor within a month a comprehensive 5 to 6 page report on the market opportunities related to that invention. The SWOT analysis, which is really a strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat analysis of that invention disclosure, the commercialization potential of their IPD, will be sent to them, as I said, within 1 month of them sending an invention disclosure. Of course, after assessment, we will send that report back to the faculty, and in conjunction with them, we will make our patenting decisions. If we both agree that it's too early or there's a reason why somebody else has already done it, not to patent, that's fine. If you both agree we should be patenting, that's fine. But if there's a disagreement, we still want their next IPD. So in order to keep the trust going, and since we are making educated guesses, but still guesses at predicting the future, we are happy to give this invention disclosure, sign it back to the faculty if there's a disagreement. The partnership. So we then are going to market and license this technology to either an existing entity or create a new startup. Our commercialization efforts are on the right, where we use tools like social media, web presence, conferences, and we have access to a new tool called Flintbox, which is a common marketplace that many, many universities deploy. And so companies that are interested in seeking or licensing university technologies know to go to Flintbox because it's almost like a one-stop shop. We now have access to that. And so your inventions will be advertised there. But help us help you. We need you, the faculty, the inventor, to make your invention known to the rest of the world via your presentations, seminars, publications, and conferences, because they would rather trust you, their peer, than me, a business person, when we talk about your inventions. We also need your help and your connections in industry, in the venture capital world, and with people who have C-suite experience. C-suite meaning somebody who's been a CEO or CEO or CSO in different organizations, because chances are you have a postdoc or a mentor or a mentee or a grad student who fits one of these descriptions. And again, your connections to them are what we would like to leverage to help us market your invention and perhaps start a new company around it. Lastly, this again was our process, and you're familiar with that. But really, if you look at it more closely, we do the pre-invention, you do the disclosing of invention, we assess something, and then there's a lot of us here. So really, it's not our process, it's our process. Who we are and what we do. We have achieved quite a bit in the short stint that we've been here. It's a very small team, but we are excited about growing. So feel free to take an opportunity to join us. We're excited about what we do, and we hope to make a difference. Thanks very much. Any questions? Questions?
Thanks, Karthik. A quick question, comment. So many of the folks in the audience are research support staff members.
Right.
I assume that, and I want you to reiterate that inventions can come from anywhere, not just faculty, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so a lot of the great ideas, they don't necessarily just come from faculty, and or you all can help your faculty channel their ideas in these directions.
Thank you, Chris. That's absolutely correct. Yes.
The other question, comment was about you interact with faculty who have a 5-year grant, and you get on to in the second, third year, so that there's time to repurpose the funding. I want to make sure that we understand what that means, that you can't take funding that you've written a proposal for that you're going to deliver on and repurpose it without, you just can't do that. You've got to be careful about repurposing the money. Talk about that a little bit.
Sure, it's a good question. And I'm not trying to, there's a research integrity office right here, so I should be very careful what I say. So it is really making the faculty and the research administration folk aware of the commercial potential and opportunities that might be in line with their research. But it is really an awareness such that if there was this one more experiment that is still relevant and germane to do in the course of your research, that also has a commercial angle, then consider doing that. We're not asking, I will never tell you to do anything, but it's at least making you aware and informed about the options that you have to consider. And if that has a commercial scope, then we just want to make you, keep you aware and get you informed about that.
Thanks for that clarification.
Sure. Any other questions?
So Karthik, are you open to going out and talking to departments, the faculty meetings?
Yes.
So that you can help these people get the information out to the faculty? Because I don't know how many IPDs we have a year, but I suspect that we could have a lot more.
We certainly can. I mean, UAB, and this was news to me before I came here, after I came here actually. So the fact that we generate $600 million of research funding, clearly we have super faculty who are very, very smart. I think some of the processes that we have and programs that we have developed, which would bring to the faculty the awareness of the commercial potential of their research, would hopefully encourage them to engage and interact with us far more. And thank you, Melinda. This is our master slide deck, so you're going to see more of the same with a little bit of tweaks. And we are more than happy to engage with any one of your departments, and happy to present at any forum that you think is appropriate. We will also, in fact, we started this in a few schools where we have some of my associates having office hours, including me. So we would go to specific schools and 1 day a week, maybe 3-4 hours, just be there. If you come and talk to us, great. It's just lowering the bar for your engaging with us. If you don't come and talk to us, we have our laptops, we'll be doing our work anyway. So this is just a way for us to approach you and lower the bar and make it easy for you to work with us. Thank you. All right, thank you.
Okay, I have one more for you guys, and we added some more for you guys who just came in. And by the way, I forgot to say this, Lumbar is a science-themed restaurant. So they've donated this, so take a look at their website. They have some really cool things on their website. Some really cool drinks. So 303. All right. That mic needs to be turned on, maybe. Still turn green.
All right. So I am not new to UAB. I've been here for about 14 years, but as far as people being new into their office, I think I have everybody speaking here beat because I started January 1st. So a lot of new and exciting things going on in the world of research development. Skipping slides. So what is research development? Basically, I'm going to read this real quick, but then I'm going to go into it. So it's a set of proactive, catalytic, and capacity building tools designed to support the efforts of individual faculty members, teams of researchers, and central administration offices in attracting extramural research funding. So what does that mean? Basically, we are here to guide and facilitate all of the different entities that need to work together. We're going to build bridges and build relationships to make it easier for faculty and teams of faculty to submit really high quality proposals that, like this last line says, reduce the number of times that UAB investigators encounter the terms not discussed or unscored. So who are we? Currently, we are an office of 2. We are a wonderful office of 2. I've actually known Dr. Kaiser since I came to UAB. He was one of my first graduate school instructors. And it's really an honor to get to work with him now. But so Dr. Kaiser is the Associate Vice President, Research Development and Internal Programs. I am the Director of Research Development. We both have experience with the university-wide interdisciplinary research center program from different capacities. Both have experience writing and helping others write all kinds of different forms of proposals and fun facts. So Dr. Kaiser has extensive experience with successful and unsuccessful submissions. I am a nerd when it comes to writing. I love details, and I got into research administration really because I love rules and I love following rules and helping others follow rules. So I like to do the really boring stuff for you. Skipping. Okay. All right. So we don't write the grants for you, but we will help you in any way possible and help your teams to submit successful submissions. So I would just raise of hands, I would like to know who knows that whenever you're submitting a proposal that you can have it reviewed for free through one of our offices or like basically through us. Who knows? And who actually has their grants reviewed prior to submission or helps their, whoever they're working with. So there's a lot of room for improvement. I mean, we have these resources and I'm going to go through what they are, but since we have this, there's really no reason to skip this really important step that is provided to you through different entities on campus and through our office. So there are lots of different schools and centers that provide very specific proposal reviews. And we're going to find a way to get all of that together and list that on our website. But also, so CCTS, through the panels programs, will review anything that is translational. And the implementation group basically serves any of our other investigators on campus that are not doing traditional medical research, or it may be in fields like Department of Energy or something humanities focused, anything like that. So they'll do a review. And if their team of, I think it's about 250 or so researchers, cannot get the review done, then they will outsource and make sure that a content expert is reviewing your proposal. So we have this available. Just get in touch with us, please. To continue on with what Matt Ronning was saying for research integrity, things that we have that can help you eliminate some of these areas where you can get into murky waters. So Authenticate, which you can access by going to uab.edu/authenticate, will review any papers, any documents that you have to test for plagiarism, similar to, I think there was another one, Turnitin. I think this is the newer, better way of doing things now. So please use this resource. And then Lab Archives, which he spoke on, which from my understanding of it so far is it's a really, really neat resource where it keeps your lab notebook. It's like all electronic, but you cannot, you can go in and edit it, but you can't ever erase what was there. So there's no way to try and pretend like you didn't have something recorded on there before, edit numbers or anything, because it's always there and it's always going to show up. So it's a really good way to protect the integrity of the lab's work. So this, whenever you go to sign in here, there will be a place that says, put in a code, and it's going to be this capital B LAZ 35. Right. So other resources that we have in our office reviews any requests for applications that are of limited submissions. So it says, there's only one or two that may submit from this organization. So we will put together a review group to decide whose application reaches the level of merit that should be representative of UAB. Also, if you're not, most of you should be familiar with the UWorks program, the university-wide interdisciplinary research centers. But if you're not, we also host that program. Currently has 23 different centers that service all different areas of interdisciplinary work across campus, including lots of pilot funding. And also our office hosts the Institutional Research Core Program. And off the top of my head, I can't tell you how many there are, but there are plenty. There is a core for everything on campus. I think Core Day comes around every August, and if you haven't been, please go and check out all the resources that we have. Questions?
Did you say that both lab archives and Authenticate are available to all UAB persons?
Yes, that
Either
is correct.
Blazer ID or password, or you had, it's a special login?
Right, so whenever you go onto, so the Authenticate one, you're going to log in using your Blazer ID and password, and the Lab Archives uses the code to let you get in.
And can you tell me a little more about what Authenticate does? Could I put my graduate student's thesis in there and it's going to tell me if any portions of his thesis?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes, and I think the preferred document type is Word, but there's a list of lots of different, I can't tell you what all they are, but there's several different formats that can be uploaded. All right, well, thank you all.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's see if we can get this going. I'm Ron Collins, Executive Director of Procurement. I had the privilege of presenting at the first Research Administrative Forum, and I guess I did something right, or somebody wants to hear something because they invited me back. So here we go. Real quickly, my agenda, things that we're going to talk about is just a quick overview of purchasing versus procurement. Again, I said I'm the Executive Director of Procurement, and for the most part, that's not a word that's usually used at UAB, or has not historically been used that much. Then we'll talk about FY19 by the numbers. P cards and by UAB, it is a repeat from back in October, but I think still bears repeating. Airline requisitions, I think shared with you, this group, last time we met, that things were changing. They have changed. So we'll talk about kind of what's happening now. And then multifunction printers, i.e. copiers. So we'll jump right into it. Forget where to point. Purchasing. Purchasing is basically the day-to-day activity. It's the basics of acquiring the things that you need in order to do your job and get what needs to be done. But there are rules that the purchasing team, of course, has to comply with. That's for us to worry about, but we ask you to be aware of some of those rules. Again, don't ask you to worry about all those details, but when you're working with purchasing and they're asking questions, they're generally asking for a reason, not just to hassle you. But procurement, though, if you contrast purchasing and procurement, they're similar. They're obviously very related, but procurement has more of a strategic focus. So it talks about really the researching, negotiation, the planning. It's kind of cradle to grave. It's thinking about more than just the actual purchase. So purchasing is what happens on that day-to-day. It's processing that requisition to issue the PO, but procurement might generally be referred to as bigger projects or equipment acquisitions, things like that. So I want to encourage you to engage procurement before you go and think you have to figure it out on your own. Reach out to procurement/purchasing. And they'll be practicing more of the procurement aspect of their job than the purchasing aspect, and they'll help you get maybe get what you need faster, hopefully for less, and with more competitive terms for UAB. So by the numbers, real quickly, since we closed out FY19. Accounts payable, just to give you a sense of kind of that volume that's going through accounts payable. And this, by the way, is not just campus. AP is one of the resources that is still supporting departments that actually supports the hospital as well as the campus. Invoices, 165,000 invoices processed, representing lines, 663,000 lines, for a total of $227 million represented by those invoices. The checks is a number, so that's 155,000 checks. That's a payment request and purchase requisition number, all combined. So all of our payments for the FY19 period, 155,000 checks. It's actually a huge opportunity for us, and hopefully we'll be able to reduce that number, not to the detriment of any service or goods being provided, but rather figuring out a different way, because every check that's issued is anywhere between, kind of industry standard is anywhere between $25 and $35. It costs UAB $25 to $35, depends on who you listen to issue a check. So where we can automate that process or electronically pay the vendors that we need to pay or pay who we need to pay, we'll be better off. University purchasing, requisition lines, purchase orders, I won't read them, but contracts administered, 5,000 plus. We do have the new system in place, so next year I'll be able to tell you exactly that number, but this year represented a transition between our old, what we call the red folder process, and that new CMS. Some might say that new hated CMS, but either way, that's the system we're using, and hopefully you're seeing a benefit from using it all electronic as well. Total expenditures, again, this number represents the total expenditure, total payments that UAB has made. So $2.7 billion, quite a big number. And that actually ties into another slide that we'll talk about here in a second. P cards, it goes back to directly to that previous slide. If we can take a fraction of what we're spending through those payment requests and all of those very expensive checks that we're issuing, and use a P card in an appropriate fashion, then it's a win. It's going to be a win. We still have to be compliant to state of Alabama bid law, any expenditure guidelines that are already in place, and any vendor agreements that may be in place. But with a P card, you can do a lot of things, especially if you used to do it with a payment request. You very well could do it with a P card. So enough about that, but I'll show you who's using them. This is a December snapshot, and just to give you a sense, just in December, you know, we've got all these organizations and the roll up of their spend on a P card. Again, this is that piece of plastic that an individual that falls into one of these organizations, or perhaps the organization themselves have a P card, rolls up to 2.2 million. What you don't see up here is accounts payable. They actually use the P card themselves, their own department, and working with some of the vendors that are happy to take an electronic payment to the tune of another $3 million. So in December alone, we used a P card in some form or fashion to the tune of about $5.2 million. And the reason that's important is the P card, again, while it's beneficial, it's a more efficient way of doing things. It's kind of like that rebates program everybody hears about, rewards card. UAB, working with regions, gets a rebate. And that rebate will go back to Central and Financial Affairs and allow us to reinvest in systems that hopefully you'll enjoy the benefit of in the future. So just to give you a background on why are P cards, well, even absent the rebate, they'll help everyone, but the rebate will also help us reinvest without having to scrounge for additional capital. No, sir. No, sir. Good question. That was just a snapshot of what December looked like. Let me back up. I didn't want to bore everyone with the details, but in total for the month, for the year, calendar year, January through December, our total spends were about 43 million in total. So again, and that's an AP working with vendors that will accept a P card, as well as the actual P card spend where someone is using a P card, a piece of plastic. Does that answer your question, Dr. Brown? Okay, very good. So this slide as well, got one label that almost flew off the slide, but it basically represents that they're being used think wholesale goes down here to that yellow pie, and I don't know what happened to the dark green, so I apologize. Miscellaneous stores, I think it's up there about 25%. But they're being used in a lot of different places. Of course, airlines, that number's on the uptick. Transportation is a pretty big number. We use the P card to pay for the Blazer Express service. Of course, that's an outsourced service. It's a contracted service, but as part of the negotiations with a vendor and as part of the RFP that we issued, we said it's going to be up to us how we pay you. And one of those payments might be via P card. And that is exactly what that is. So you just never know who will take a P card or credit card. That's all a P card is, because it has advantages both for the vendor as well as for us, UAB. Types and who can get one, I won't read the detail, but there are two types, organizations and individual cards. The list of employment categories gives you an idea of who is eligible. I want to point out that the individual, the 4 eligible employment categories there are in addition to the 3 on top. So you can be an 01, a 12, or a 59, or 03, 07, 20, 21. And the websites, the URLs are pretty easy to remember. If you're interested in learning more about the P card, uab.edu P card. Pretty self-explanatory, and it takes you right to the financial affairs webpage, and you can learn a lot more about P cards. Now let me back up, just because I want to say this and be on record. I know the Zoom is recording. I am not the P card candy man. I've been accused of being that. But there is a process that if you apply, the appropriate individuals within your organization have to approve you to get a card, whether it be an organizational card or an individual card. So I'm not saying here, call me and I'll give you a P card. There's a process. That process is actually described on that webpage, but I would encourage, of course, I would encourage you to investigate it and see if it makes sense, and then go from there. But I want to be on record. I'm not the P card candy man. By UAB Marketplace, closely associated with P card, because the only way you can take advantage of By UAB is with a P card. It talks about, it transforms the way goods and services are purchased at UAB. It essentially allows you to replace iProcurement with a transaction through By UAB. I want to point out that access is not limited as it is on the P card side. Access is still approved. There's still an approval process, but as long as you're approved, then you will have access to By UAB. And then again, the approval process that your fiscal or business officer would recognize, yes, you have access. Maybe it's a departmental card or an individual card, but you would have access to do business with one of these 18 contracted vendors. Again, a very easy URL, uab.edu by UAB. And that is a slide of the 18 vendors that are currently in By UAB. We've got everything from promotional item vendors, several promotional item vendors. Amazon for Business is a big one out there. I'll just point out, just because you have a P card doesn't mean that you can take that P card and then go online shopping at Amazon.com. That's not a legal transaction. Amazon is not a contracted vendor. What makes Amazon for Business different is that was a contracted vendor. That was a competitively bid agreement, and we're able to access that competitively bid agreement. It's essentially a subset of everything that's out there on the Amazon.com world, but it's business oriented. There were 12 categories in the original bid, and we've restricted one category. So you can't buy furniture through Amazon for Business, but you can buy a lot of other things. And of course, you see there's scientific vendors between Fisher and VWR. Life Technologies also in that scientific space. MRO, office supplies, you got Office Depot and Staples, as well as Amazon for Business. So, and technology, of course, several of them up there. Apple, Dell, CDW. So check out By UAB. Again, very, very easy process. Went too Airline requisitions, we talked about what was coming, and like I said, this has come and now has come to pass. Purchase requisitions were disabled December 1st, 2019. We've not seen the real heavy travel season hit us yet, but I think most of the campus is beginning to adjust to not being able to submit airline requisition, purchase requisition, but instead can use, one of the options is to use this ResDesk. ResDesk is a very easy tool to go on, and it's basically a portal that you would go on and select your arrangements. I'll call out that upon the initial login, UAB travelers and travel arrangers must both update their profile before using the portal to arrange travel, and the training is right there on the main page. So again, this is off, you can get there from the admin systems page, or and the admin system page takes you to the financial affairs page, or you can go directly to UAB Financial Affairs, and you'll find traveling there as well. ResDesk benefits, again, for those that are just asking, well, why would I use ResDesk? Why not just use Expedia or any of those other online? Many of these benefits may not directly, although at least there's one, but may not directly impact you. But if you're using Expedia, I would have no idea of being able to tell where you've gone. The only person that may know where you are or know your whereabouts at any point in that travel is your boss, maybe your significant other, maybe the person that's covering for you. But if you're using ResDesk, there's some admin tools that are associated with this that can actually take a global view or even just a national view. You can scale down, and if I need to look at what's happening in California, for instance, Southern California, who's flying into LA because there's an incident at LAX, then I would be able to answer that question. If you're not using ResDesk, you might be one of those people that's flying into LAX, but I don't know about it. So it's very, that duty of care compliance is something that you may have heard about from the international side, but now kind of in today's world, it's really global, and it should be a concern from a global standpoint. ResDesk is not mandated, but highly encouraged. So we talk about the difference of booking fees as well. If you're used to calling Shirley at AdTrav, she's been around 20 years, many of you may have talked to her, that's a $25 transaction. But you can do everything that you would normally do with Shirley online for $7.75. So saving you, your department, money. Plus, you're not actually waiting on the agent. You're essentially the agent, but it's very easy to tailor. I'm going from here to here, the dates, the time that you want to fly, choose the airline, and book it. If your profile doesn't include a payment method, it'll ask you how you're going to pay for this. At that point, I encourage you to submit put a P card in and pay for it with your P card. But if you're very generous and want to loan UAB some money for a little while, you can use your personal card. That's fine too. It is not mandated to use a P card, but encouraged. Not many people want to loan that money, but it's up to you. Multifunction printers. So this is the last topic, and I think I'm okay on time, right? Yeah, okay. 5 over. Holy mackerel. So this is a new program. Many of you may have heard about it, but it's finally here. It is called the Cost Per Click program, and it is different than how we've acquired copiers or multifunction printers, MFPs, whatever you want to call it. It's different than how we've acquired them in the past. We are standardizing the equipment. We're working with one vendor. The cost in the cost per click is all inclusive. It's the equipment, it's the maintenance, it's the toner, all part of the cost per click. We are beginning to roll it out now, but with February 2020 deployment we think there's probably about between 80 and 90 machines that need to be replaced right now. And then as you need a copier, this would be the program that you would utilize. At the point, there will be a PO to issue to order the copier, but the billing on the back end will be consolidated through my office and then journal entries back to the departments. One note here, we talk about sustainability and security wins. We eliminate the double printed or misplaced print jobs. I thought I printed it, but I can't find it. Somebody else had picked up your job with their job. All that gets eliminated because the job that you printed will only print when you scan your one card. Follow Me Printing permits the user to print to the generic printer address. It's going to be Uniflow, or that's the software. I'm not sure what we're going to call it. And then they'll retrieve the print job from any, again, we're going to call these CPC machines, even if that's in another building. So if Dr. Brown had printed something in his office, but he forgot to pick it up before he came to this meeting, but he needed that, he would be able to go and find that CPC machine that should be here in Spain Wallace somewhere, scan his badge and his job. It would ask him which job does he want to print out, and he chooses, and now it is printing out for him, and it's not left on the machine in his office, which would probably be okay in Dr. Brown's office, but here's a snapshot of what the standardized selection looks like. We've got 5 black and whites, and the differences basically are kind of the size. What's your monthly demand? And we want to get that as close as possible as far as being right. You don't want it undersized. That's underutilization of the machine that you're paying for. You also don't want to buy a very small one and then just burn it up because you're sending 15,000 copies through it. So there are 5 choices on the black and white side and 3 on the color that should accommodate most everything that we need. If not, we have the ability to go outside of standardized equipment, but I don't anticipate many exceptions. Okay, that's my last slide. Any questions at the moment? Procurement related. Yes, sir.
Hey, Ron, will you stand here at this mic and I'll watch you travel? Thank you.
And I'll ask, sorry, I was young. I'll ask to make sure that the questions are relevant to everyone so that we have time for the panel, but if they're individual questions, I'll be happy to take those offline.
Okay. My name is Christian Davis. I work in the Center for AIDS Research. So my first question is about ResDesk. Some issues we've run into in our department is that I noticed you said that they have preferred rates or whatever. But what we ran into recently with booking international travel is the PI provided us a flight that was quoted at $2,700, and we went and found that flight on ResDesk to book it for the PI. It was almost quadruple the price. The PI showed us a price that was like $2,700, and we went through ResDesk. It was almost $8,000. So what do you guys have in store for things of that such?
So the explanation there, and some of the benefits that I didn't talk about, when you book on an Expedia or whatever site that quote might have come from, that's going to be what we find is usually the back of the plane, non-refundable kind of ticket. UAB shouldn't be buying non-refundable tickets because our travel itineraries change so often. So that's one explanation, but what I would bet is those weren't comparable. Even if they were on the same flight, they weren't the same class, seat class. And so you weren't really comparing apples and apples, even if it was on the same flight. There was the Expedia tool, I pick on them, but the Expedia tool might be offering that non-refundable, very basic fare, where ResDesk is going to offer you some other options that you may not even know that you can take advantage of until you're in a situation where, hey, my itinerary's changed and what? I've got to pay a huge change fee. So, but we're happy to be able to look at the details on that. What else you got?
My next question is about the by UAB and using the different punch outs on that. So, and once again, in our department, we use our P card on by UAB a lot. But once our P card starts to reach that limit, what I personally start to do is start putting in the purchase order requisitions to try to keep from hitting that limit.
The limit is standard, meaning if Melinda's initial card was a $5,000 single transaction limit, $499.9. Single transaction limit, $10,000 monthly. But if she were to come to me and say, hey, Ron, I'm using the heck out of this P card, all legal transactions, right? Can you bump me up to $25,000 permanent? We can have that conversation. And I don't think we've said no to anybody for those, what we call permanent increases. So we start with a default, but if you're demonstrating a lot of use and can see the benefit, rather than having to submit that maintenance form or go offline and manage it, that limit is just a kind of a standard starting place. There's not a limit on you necessarily. If you said, I need $30,000 because that's all the stuff that we're buying and we're using the P card, I'm happy to change that limit for you.
All right, thank you.
Were there any other questions right there? Okay. Any other questions? If there are no others, I think we're on for a panel. Thank you.
If this doesn't work, I may have to have.
Okay.
I'll let you know.
See if it's working. Check it and see. Okay, I'll do it. I can do it for you. Oh.
Don't leave. You might have important information coming. So I thought we would spend a few minutes and just talk about, and it's so cold in here, we could change this from a panel to a fireside chat. So we're happy to take questions throughout, but I wanted to just start and throw this up because we have a lot of questions and issues that are coming up, especially when contracts are submitted through ESM. Is that what you call it now? CMS. Yeah, okay. And they come to me for approval. And so what happens is I'm looking at what the agreement is about. I'm looking at that scope of work. And hopefully you all can see this, but I start from two places. Is it incoming or is it outgoing? And determining what that is by looking at the agreement attached, then I decide what's the pathway. So if it's incoming, what is the scope of work? Is it research related? Is it research? Is it not research related at all? And go from there. If it's outgoing, oftentimes it's going to be a subaward or it may be a contractor vendor. So these are terms that are set by the federal government. And so I thought it would be helpful if we just talked about the kind of things that we see coming in and what I reject and then what I approve. And so if I reject something in there, I put a note that says submit to OSP. If I've approved it, I'm not approving the contract language, but I'm approving that it's going through university contracts and not OSP. So Ron, when you get a submission in ESM, who does it go to first? Does it go to all of us at the same time?
No, so the very first step, and again, this mimics the process that I'm going to describe, mimics the way that the red folders were done as well. For those of you that may have experienced the red folder. Contracts were submitted to university contracts, and at that point, it was submitted on the contract dashboard, and then the contract may have been submitted either via email to university contracts or scanned into OptiDoc, and those things were tied to each other. University contracts would then print that out, put that in a red folder. They're the first step. Outside of the school or the dean's approval, once it's submitted to Central, it comes to university contracts as the first step. They review the contracts and are basically scanning to see if it looks like it's IT related, but the submitter answered no to the question, is this contract have IT or is it related to software? If they've answered no, then university contracts will correct the workflow and basically add IT into that workflow. If it's research related or looks like it's research related to university contracts, but it wasn't marked as such, then that's when OSP would get added. It goes to Melinda, and Melinda would review it. Sometimes she says, nope, it on first glance may look like it's research, but it's really not. Then that's when she'll kick it back, or at that point say, not, she'll basically say OSP approved, right? And then it comes back to carry on in the workflow. At that point, it may be going to legal, or it may be going to IT, maybe going to university purchasing. Once those three, and each contract type has a different workflow defined, but once all the approvals have been gathered, the last one is usually legal, and the contract comes back to university contracts for the signature process. Where we used to, in routing contracts, we would get the UAB signature, and oftentimes that contract would go in a drawer, at least goes into OptiDoc, signed contract, and we'd make payments off a contract that's been signed by UAB, never even received by the vendor. So some of the change that has been experienced by UAB and the vendor community as well is that we actually now are operating by fully executed agreements, and that means both parties, or all parties to the contract, have agreed to the terms. Any markups or revisions both parties have signed, then payments can be made against that. So does that answer your question?
Yep. So one of the things that the Office of Counsel shared with us in another meeting last week was that they see a lot of contracts in there that are Adobe or printed scans. And so they still, and this came about as a sustainability, green conversation. So they have to print them out, and then they redline them by hand, scan them in, and then shred the document. So if you all have a Word version of the agreement, or you can get one, it would be really helpful for the Office of Counsel to have that so that they're not having to print, because they could just do their red lines within the agreement itself and then re-upload it. So I want to give you an example of something that came up last week, and I had a conversation with a faculty member, and it was enlightening because it sounded like, from what they had submitted online in the system, was that it should be a subaward. This was a clinical trial from NIH, and they were enrolling, or they were signing contracts for sites. And so when we had the conversation, before the conversation, I had a misunderstanding about what they were actually doing based on the scope of work, because it looked like they were a clinical site for enrolling the patients, each one of these sites. What it actually was is they were actually contracting with the site just for that patient population. And the UAB staff were going to those clinic sites, seeing the patients, enrolling the patients, doing the eligibility criteria. And so with that, we determined those do not need to be subawards. Those would be contracts through ESM. So those don't have to go through OSP. Had they been contracting with the site to actually enroll the patients, those would be subawards. And so the subaward sites always need that third-party determination form. So Renee, would you talk to us about, from the industry standpoint, the sorts of things that you might see with the industry agreement that they want to have sites or other subawards, subcontracts?
Yeah, sure. So the industry process regarding subcontracts is different than the federal process regarding subawards to some extent. So the industry group does not do third-party determination forms. That is not required. That's a federal requirement. What we do is when UAB, when the PI determines that they're going to have a project that's funded and we get an agreement and we're negotiating what we call that prime agreement. That is why the question is on the checklist as to whether or not there are going to be subcontracts or subawards off of that agreement, is so that your officer will know when they're negotiating that contract. And that's the time that your officer should be discussing kind of what you're planning on doing so that we can help you determine whether or not it's a true subcontract that needs to be off of that project, or if it could be a vendor agreement that should process through university contracts. So that's the point in time from an industry perspective that you're going to get some assistance from your officer to determine whether or not you're going to have true subcontracts that need to be built into your budget. And like Melinda said, the scope of work is going to drive all of that. If the PI's intent is to have sites to actually conduct the protocol and do the study, then of course that's going to be a subcontract. But if you're asking them to provide just a service, that may not be a subcontract. That may just be a vendor agreement that needs to be processed through university contract. But if there's nothing else you take away, please take away that your scope of work drives the entire process. It drives what's needed. It drives the mechanism, the contract, everything. That scope of work is what drives everything.
So Renee's team has a number of template agreements and
starting points.
Yeah. And so whenever you have a situation that you, maybe the other party doesn't have an agreement, but we know we need something, you can always reach out to your assigned officer on her team. I think the same probably with Alice. So Alice is over the nonprofit team. And so within OSP, we have quite the inventory of template agreements that we can actually look at, begin to modify based on what you need. So we just need a scope of work and what's really going on so we understand what the project is.
Yeah, we can tailor what we have so that we don't have to start from scratch to whatever your scope of work is, so that we can make sure that the contract will include any language that it needs to include to be sure that both parties are covered for the project. From a liability perspective, confidentiality perspective, an intellectual property perspective, things like that.
When I get one of the ESM requests to approve an agreement, first thing I look at is, again, the incoming and the outgoing. And if it's outgoing, I'm going to go directly to the OSP record. I found out just a few weeks ago how to go into ESM and find that OSP number. I didn't know that was in there, but it is. I now know where to go to get it, so I don't have to email anymore. And that makes it easier for me and probably easier for you all, because I'm doing all of these directly. And there's usually maybe 4 or 5 a day. So sometimes I will get backed up, and I'm sorry that you have to wait on that delay, but we get through them as fast as we can. So any questions about that initial conversation? Anything we can help with? Yes, Amber.
So you're suggesting that the best way to get this determination going is to submit it to contracts for them to then route it to you, for you to review, and then a decision is made.
Say that again?
How do we get this decision? Does it go through contracts to get assigned to you for you to make this decision? Is that the best route to get the fastest decision?
No, I mean, we would like for you all to understand what is actually occurring by the arrangement, the relationship between the two parties, so that you can make the determination, and then we're confirming that. So if you've looked at this, and we can put this on our website. I also, if you don't know, I think everybody probably knows by now, we do have the fee-for-service decision tree. And this, of course, is just incoming contracts, incoming funds. But it walks you through a series of questions, and it will tell you, have you ever used this, Amber, the decision tree?
It's usually outgoings that I have issues with.
Okay. So this decision tree walks you through a series of questions, and when you get to the end, it tells you where you should submit and what you need to submit. But the quickest way is for you to try to figure out for yourself what you need to do, and then we're confirming that it's the right place or not the right place.
And if we have questions, are we calling you? We calling Renee? We calling contracts?
Call your officer.
Yeah, call the
Call your
officer.
OSP officer. They'll be happy to take a look. Now, you're gonna need a scope of work because you can call and get the hypothetical all day long, but if you don't have a scope of work, all they're gonna be able to do is give you a general answer because, and then it may or may not be correct based on your scope of work that you end up with.
And let's also say, I'm sorry,
No,
Renee.
go ahead.
Let's also say that we need a detailed scope of
Yes.
work. Because if we just get a one-sentence scope of work that says, we're gonna make widgets, or we're gonna contract with company X to make widgets, that doesn't tell us much. And so we need a much more detailed scope of work so we can really understand what what your faculty is trying to do.
We're gonna have a really hard time helping you determine what it is if that's what we get.
Because we're gonna come back and ask a lot of questions.
And that's what we get a lot.
And the back and forth is a drag on your time and a drag on our time. We want to help you, but we also want to provide tools that educate. So if you go through the decision tree or you look at, there we go. You go through this once we post it and you still have questions, please, by all means, reach out to your OSP officer.
That way you're not wasting your time, making submissions to one or the other office without getting some assistance somewhere.
Because believe it or not, the last thing we want to do is delay y'all. Other questions, issues, specific questions about problems that have come up? We've got a little more time. We dedicated the last 30 minutes for networking, but we're happy to, continue with this if necessary, or you all can chat amongst yourselves for networking. And we also got some feedback on mentoring, so we can also talk about that.
So,
Right.
so in the framework of trying to make things a little bit quicker and easier, and I've asked this question before, so I apologize for asking it again. At one point in time, some boilerplate language about subject medical injury, indemnification, Alabama state law that applied, as I understood it, to all contracts was available that we could share to vendors upfront so that they could start including it in their contracts to start with. It is no longer available. So is that just gone, or is there ever going to be an opportunity to bring that back?
So from a university contract standpoint, one of the new programs, we've got a lot of things going on in procurement, many impact you guys, but one of the things that we are working through right now is a tool called iSupplier. Anybody heard of it? iSupplier is where if we're making a payment to a vendor, then they need to be registered in iSupplier. That is where they're going to submit their W-9 and their vendor disclosure statements, the required documentation that UAB is looking for. One of the ideas that we want to incorporate is agreement by the vendors to some standard terms and conditions, and we're going to post that as a required terms that in order to do business with UAB, these are the standard terms, and it's going to be attached to that vendor. That iSupplier is a vendor portal. So many of you may have seen or received requests from vendors saying, hey, my address has changed, or can you send something here versus here? And that has historically been sent to vendor compliance, the vendor compliance team. But by allowing the vendors to maintain, do that self-maintenance, we'll all be more efficient. Plus, we'll also eliminate the PHI, the Social Security numbers for individuals floating around the campus as well through emails and unsecured methods. So iSupplier is that tool, and we hope to incorporate those standard terms and conditions at that site level.
So Mike, I think you're referring to the contract guidelines that we had on the OSP website at one point. So we did take those down, and we took them down because it became so fluid that it was changing all the time as far as position is concerned, that it was difficult to keep that up to date. And so with discussions with Office of Counsel, we decided that it was probably best to take that down so that people weren't accidentally giving out less than up-to-date information. So the positions tend to change occasionally, and so we just wanted to ensure that people were getting up-to-date information instead of having those discussions on the back end after sponsors had already been given language.
Other questions? All right. Well, we really appreciate y'all coming. I hope this has been helpful. Our next one will be in May. We haven't nailed down the date yet, but we'll definitely distribute it as soon as we get that date settled. Thank you.
And thank you to Tish Fuller, who did our questions for us.